Chris Christie is in the presidential race, and not just the Republican Party, which desperately needs him, but the country is better for it. That is today's Stay Dirty, Stay Moderate. So Chris Christie, two-term governor from a blue state. For the record, New Jersey has not voted for Republican in a presidential election since 1988 when George H.W. Bush carried it. Since then, it has been blue, though they have elected Republican governors throughout their history, and especially in current times. Chris Christie served from 2009 to 2017, and he was arguably pretty popular. I mean, he was reelected handily, handled Hurricane Sandy very well. Cap property taxes did a lot of good for I think the public pension system and how he reformed it, got under control. Second term, he battled what I believe was a big nothing burger in Bridgegate. Sorry. Okay. He got back at a rival. He closed the GW, whatever. I think he was fearless. I think he was courageous. As you can tell, I like him. I do agree with assessments. He should have run in 2012. He was all poised to run in 2012 against Barack Obama. He was in his first term then. I don't know if he would have beaten Barack Obama. Who knows? I think he would have been a stronger general election candidate than Mitt Romney, and many people want him to, but he didn't think he was ready. Okay. So then in 2016, he enters the race. He tore apart a little Marco on stage, pretty much went at everybody, but ended up being a Trump guy. And this is the only quandary I have with Chris, though in my eyes, he is forgiven. He didn't really strike an independent note. But you know what? The Chris Christie that voters chose originally in New Jersey 12 years ago is the Chris Christie we're seeing now. And you know what? To quote Frank Bruni, who has a fabulous piece in the New York Times about this, Chris Christie is doing something very, very important. Frank Bruni said, the Chris Christie of the current moment is magnificent. I don't mean magnificent as in he's going to win the Republican presidential nomination. I don't mean I am rooting for a Christie presidency and regard him as the country's possible salvation. But what he's doing in this Republican primary contest is very, very important. It also couldn't be more emotionally gratifying. It also couldn't be more emotionally gratifying to behold. He's telling the unvarnished truth about Trump, and he's the only candidate doing that. A former prosecutor, he's artfully, aggressively, and comprehensively making the case against Trump. This is still a quote, folks. Knocking down all the rationalizations Trump has mustered and all the diversions he has contrived since his 37-count federal indictment. None of the other candidates come close, Bruni continues. They, for the most part, gag themselves or decide to play laughable word games about who Trump is, what he has done, and what he yet may do. End quote. Okay. So I got to give a lot of credit to Bruni. I like Bruni. I read him at the Times a lot. I think he's eloquent. I don't really know his politics. He certainly tends liberal. Obviously, he got it in there that he's not saying Chris Christie is his man, but he's saying what Chris Christie represents is essential. I am not sure Chris Christie's not the man. I voted for Joe Biden. You all know that. I was raised as a Democrat. I voted for Hillary Clinton. I've been an independent. That's what Dirty Moderate's about. I'm open, and we should all be open to something very important that Chris Christie represents. Chris Christie isn't just telling the truth. He may be the fumigator of Agent Orange. He may be the fumigator of Agent Orangeism. What does that mean? That means he may literally be able to eliminate the stench of Trumpism from the Republican Party. He could be, if he were able to get that nomination, an actual viable center-right choice the country could choose on whether or not to elect Joe Biden for a second term, a certainly accomplished president and a decent man, or take a different route, but not take a route toward authoritarianism. Not take a route toward dogmatism, not take a route toward hyperpartisanship, not take a route toward toxic polarization, but take a route for an alternative. a Republican alternative, but an old-fashioned Republican alternative. In a poll released about a week ago by the New Hampshire Journal, Christie had pulled into third place in New Hampshire. He's well behind Trump, by the way, but he's not far behind Ron DeSantis. Chris Christie's at 9%, DeSantis is at 13%. And obviously, Christie's focusing in on New Hampshire because he knows if he makes a stink in New Hampshire, that's always the first Republican, the second Republican primary. The first is the Iowa caucus, but New Hampshire tends to be a little bit more reliable. A lot of people who won the Iowa caucus don't necessarily go on to be president. See Mike Huckabee, see Rick Santorum. They all won Iowa. None of them not only did they not become president, they become the Republican nominee. But Chris Christie is literally doing all the things that you wish every other Republican would do. Okay? I mean, The Atlantic is running pieces now. They ran one last Monday with a headline, Chris Christie, liberal hero. He's a liberal hero because he's going against their guy. It's the enemy of my enemy is my friend shtick. Listen, Chris Christie does two things. He eviscerates Trump. He makes the rest of the field look like weak, sycophantic lickspittles. One of my favorite words George Will taught me in the Trump era. Someone who genuflects at the altar, bows down, ass kisses like a sycophant, does whatever. Mike Pence, for example, was Trump's lickspittle. And most of the candidates on there will be Trump's lickspittle yet again. Ron DeSantis will try to carve out that ground where he's wary of being too Trumpian, but he will play his songs as poorly and as inauthentically as a Trump tribute band. Chris Christie will release fresh new music that will do away with the synthetic and the sycophancy and the lies, most importantly, the crimes. How hard is it for these candidates? And by the way, I've always liked Nikki Haley. She's really disappointing me. She doesn't know what lane she's in. Okay. She goes back and forth. Yeah, she served Trump too. Now, Chris Christie was angling for cabinet positions. He didn't get one. He has said recently on a podcast with Charlie Sykes, he was offered chief of staff. He turned it down. He was offered secretary of labor. He turned it down. And he was twice offered secretary of Homeland Security. He turned that down. I believe him because he realized pretty quickly, as he put it, these are Christie's words, with Trump, one day you're trading at 100 cents on the dollar. You disagree with him, and the next day you're trading at zero. You can't disagree with him. And what's been more fundamental to Trumpism is that you can't disagree with it, because if you disagree with it, you're out. And what's been more perilous and what's been more dangerous and what's been more harmful and what's been more undermining for our democracy than the fact that disagreement is viewed as enemy territory, that people with whom you disagree are your enemies inside the Trump tent. Inside the tent to the left, folks, I dare any leftist or any progressive or any mainstream Democrat to come out, save for a few, and challenge Biden's terrible border policy or question transgender men in sports or actually say, hey, you know what? Maybe student loan debt shouldn't be forgiven. I mean, these are just things. I'm not saying I agree with them. I'm saying, but try doing that as a Democrat if you're not Joe Manchin. See how well that goes. Case in point, Chris Christie is blowing apart or trying to blow apart to smithereens the Trump cult. But Chris Christie has shown as governor, right? This is not an endorsement. I'm just giving you the facts because in a lot of the media, you're not going to hear this. He was a governor with policy ideas. He's not a culture warrior. Chris Christie was a state representative. At one point, yes, he was very, very pro-gun control. Now, apparently, he's not as pro-gun control. Okay, well, I just did a big episode with Matthew Lippman on realistic gun control, so let's hear more from Chris Christie. Chris Christie has been pro-life. Okay, I don't know. Does that mean that Chris Christie supported Dobbs? I don't know. I'm certainly devoutly pro-choice, but I'm going to go into something further and deeper here. I don't have to agree with everybody on everything. I don't have to agree with every president on everything. It doesn't mean I don't have values. It means I have nuance. It means I'm willing to look at things issue by issue, which we no longer do. The country is constantly in a fight against itself. Trump made the left nuts. He did. And the left reacted with passion and fury, rightly so in many instances, but not always. You know, in 2008 and 2012, I voted for Barack Obama twice, and we were lectured by the mainstream media and by the Democratic Party that John McCain was the devil and Mitt Romney was the devil. But then the devil came to call. His name was Donald Trump. And you were not prepared for that devil. If Chris Christie starts to rise and seems like he's to be the nominee, there will be a smear attempt at Chris Christie like you've never seen. He will be made out to be fascist and authoritarian like the rest of them. And folks, he is not. And we do ourselves an injustice if we don't heed the words of what Frank Bruni is writing. Okay? Frank Bruni goes on to write this. But the swoon isn't about Christie's prospects. It's about the hugely valuable contrast to other Republican presidential candidates that he's providing. And about this, here's the takeaway. This is a quote again by Bruni. The health of American democracy hinges on a reckoning within the Republican Party. And that won't come from Democrats saying the kind of things that Christie is now. They've been doing that for years. It'll come, if it even can, from the words and warnings of longtime Republicans who know how to get and use a spotlight. End quote. Okay. Now we know Liz Cheney did it. We know Adam Kinzinger did it, but they're both out. Adam's district was redistricted. He didn't run. Liz Cheney lost her primary by 40 points. These were two heroes that are absolutely should be proud of what they did. Chris Christie's long been out of office. He's been on ABC News as a commentator on Sunday mornings with George Stephanopoulos. And he makes a case for why he does not think Joe Biden deserves a second term. He doesn't attack Joe Biden personally. He doesn't call the Democrats communists. He doesn't attack marginalized groups. He doesn't say things that alienate. He speaks policy. It's a kind of traditional center-right position that has made so many of us pine for and long for in this divided cesspool that we live in of partisanship. Chris has got a sense of humor. He's smart, whip smart, actually. He's real New Jersey. You might say he's real New York. I love it. Right? And he knows that Trump is so selfish and so awful. And he should have said it sooner, but he did say it from 2020 on. As soon as he started lying about the election, that was it. And by the way, he's not wrong because as we've said on this podcast over and over again, if you lie about the election, if we can't agree on who wins and who loses an election, democracy is doomed because that's its basic tenet. Somebody runs, somebody wins, somebody loses. Chris Christie's a prosecutor, a lawyer, as I mentioned, so he knows how to talk the legalese. He knows how to break it down for people, right? The rest of the Republicans run scared, just like Liz Cheney said. Oh, so many people would come up and whisper to her, thank you for doing this. You're right. You're a hero. And she'd say, I'm not a hero. It's what you should be doing too. Well, this may not get Chris Christie the nomination, but he's doing it. And there is no political gain. And this is the irony. And this is where the Republican ecos the Republicans are in their own bubble. Both parties are in a bubble. Okay. I always take on the GOP for being in their bubble. I take on the left for being in their bubble, not having any fucking clue about anything outside their own world. They don't understand that independents like me see Trump's indictment for espionage as a huge negative. Not that I'd ever vote for Trump. He will not win independence. He is damaged goods. And you know what? I know indictments are coming from Fani Willis in Georgia and probably another from Jack Smith on January 6th. This may work in the Republican primary, guys. This is wacko bird stuff. But it isn't working. It isn't working in the general. And it won't work, which is why Trump lost the first time. But he also lost because it was time for a change. He'd mismanaged COVID and people had enough of the crazy and the narcissism and the hate tweeting. And quite frankly, the cruelty. People always say, oh, his policies were good. I didn't like his behavior. What policies? Chris Christie has policies. Trump had nothing. He gave tax cuts that he should have given to the middle class. He gave them to the top, blew a hole in the deficit, put tariffs on China that only bankrupted most agricultural entities and farmers that we had to then bail out for billions of dollars. So goes on and on and on. I hope that Chris Christie makes other people see that they should do better, right? And speak up. It's like, wow, we've got, Liz Cheney, we got Adam Kinzinger, we got Chris Christie. But Pence, Haley, Tim Scott, Ron DeSantis, they all are worried about upsetting Trump's base. That's what they know. Chris Christie isn't. And there's something to be said about that. Chris Christie was at a conference today speaking to faith-based leaders, and they booed him when he ripped into Trump. And he said, boo all you want. Boo all you want. But here's the quote. You can boo all you want, but here's the thing. Our faith teaches us that people have to take responsibility for what they do. Ooh, how's that for something? Party of family values, the Republicans always lecturing everybody on values and morality and who does what, who can love who, and who can do what with their body. Well, how about you take some responsibility for your cult leader and for the damage done to democracy and the lies you've been told and say, we got it wrong and we're not going to go down this road again. We're going to go another way. And Trump isn't your guy. DeSantis isn't your guy. This is broken, folks. And the great myth and fallacy of this is they think, oh, we got Ron DeSantis, then we got all the good stuff. Without it, no, you get a decrepit, mean-spirited, petty, vengeful guy whose policies fucking suck and turn my home state of Florida into its own shithouse or its own shithole country. Remember that? Not Chris Christie. And again, I'm not saying Chris Christie is Superman. I don't deify politicians. But I do see a world, or I should say I dream of one, where there is a Republican alternative to Joe Biden that I might consider. That I say, whoa, here's a possibility. It would be good for the party if his voice is there, if he's elevated. It would be great for the country for them to say we have real choices. It isn't Biden do or die, Biden or there go the erosion of our liberties. There goes the American idea, the American experiment. America is just an idea. It's always has been. As I always say, it's an experiment. And that's Chris Christie offering a way, not as a Democrat, but as a Republican. We have two parties. We are supposedly a two-party country, and we have got to stick by that if we are to survive. We do need more parties, trust me. I am neither a Republican nor a Democrat, but we can't just have Democrats and Democrats because we're living in cowering and fear. And also, we're not going to get certain things out of Democrats because they're going to play politics with their side, with their base. And isn't everybody tired of it? Isn't everybody tired, not just of the bullshit, but of the fact that we don't have choices and we deserve better? Chris Christie said of Trump today when he was leaving, when reporters swarmed him after this faith-based conference. This is a guy who paid off a porn star, quote. This guy offered me White House chief of staff. Then he's on a podcast saying he never trusted me. What does that make him? A liar or an idiot? I question you, my listeners, my good Americans. We say we can only have Trump or Biden. What does that make us? Just submissive? Or does it make us stupid? Or maybe it shows that we aren't fighting hard enough. Democracy is what you make of it. Authoritarians count on your apathy. It's not up to me or to them or to you. It's up to all of us. It's all we got. It's all we got, America. So I am, again, loving to see Chris Christie in this race. Happy that he is in there and rooting for him to go far. Go Chris Christie. Folks, thank you for listening. Make sure you catch us on TikTok with all our content over there. More passion, more fun at Dirty Moderate Nation. So much good stuff coming up on it. We got some big guests and big projects coming your way. Oh, yes. 2024 is fast upon us, and we will be central to that conversation because of you, our loyal listeners, and those listeners yet to come. Thank you for those who support us. And of course, in the meantime, stay dirty, stay moderate, and of course, stay safe.